Hey guys, it's Q&A Tuesday. Before I get started, I want to talk about the fact that I'm very impressed by your guys' knowledge. One of the episodes I was wearing an orange scuba diver made for Wempy, and a ton of you guys got that right. AP made a lot of scuba diver watches, and some of them were regular production, a lot of them were limited production. And it takes a pretty trained eye to recognize that particular limited edition was limited to 300 pieces for Wempy. So kudos to you. I guess you passed the quiz.
Bobby, tell them what they won. A new typewriter. It's your very own racing car. It's a VCR. Your very own color TV.
And you don't get to win anything, sorry. Anyway, I'm gonna dive right into some questions. First question is gonna be from Philip Marcezal, and I apologize if I got your name wrong, Philip. Hey Roma, love the fact that you're addicted to AP. Since that, I had the chance to work in a retail for them back in Geneva. Currently own a 2590 SK 00D002 CA 03. That would make it a stainless steel rubber clad, as is most known, that I bought for what I thought was a great deal last year for $13,000. I'm looking to sell it, but I'm getting bowballed at $8K from few of the online retailers. I don't understand why the price has gone so low for stainless steel diver's watch that has a great retro look. Please let me know what's happening. You want the long or the short version? I'll give you both. The short version, the watch got old.
Look at her, she's old.
And the rubber clad has been out almost 20 years now, right? It was a great option when it first came out for a sporty watch, something other than a stainless steel. The use of rubber was pretty avant-garde at the time when they came out. It was a very, very popular watch. I've sold a lot of them. The rose gold, the stainless steel black, the stainless steel white dials. And they had a great run, but right now they just got old. And that's really the short version to answer your question. The long version to answer your questions is maintenance issues. That is one of the very few watches that I, as a dealer, I talked about the fact that condition is irrelevant as long as the watch is not completely hacked, to me anyway, and it should be to you because it's an easy fix. The rubber clad is one of those things that at first was an easy fix, and later became a very hard fix, and I'll explain why. Having worked for a retailer that sells AP, you should actually know this. The rubber bezel, once it gets beat up, you can't fix it, you have to replace it. The rubber that AP uses, both for the strap and the bezel, is a type of rubber that over time will get old, it will solidify, it will become hard as a rock, and eventually will crack. From daily wear, from exposure to the outside elements, et cetera, et cetera. Same thing happens to the bezel. I've seen rubber clads come in where there's chunks of the bezel like literally taken out, and you can see the steel in between. What's the issue there? The issue there, the cost of replacement. The bezel cost is like $1,250. We used to be able to get that from the company. Much like I would order a strap, I can order the bezel. Seemingly an easy fix. You pay $1,200, put a new bezel on, the watch is perfect, voila. AP stopped selling them to the public. Now, in order to get that bezel replaced, you have to send the watch in. Now it becomes a $2,500 ordeal. And this is probably why you're getting lowballed from a lot of these online retailers. $8,000 is very low. $8,000 would be a price for your watch if the bezel was completely bit to shit, meaning it has to be replaced. I don't know the condition of your watch. Feel free to email me a picture and I'll gladly take a look. If your bezel is still in decent condition, and by decent condition meaning it doesn't have to be replaced and it still looks okay, it's not solidified. By solidified I mean it's not rock hard already, and you can easily tell that it becomes really shiny. It's only a matter of time until it starts cracking, right? Then your watch is worth more. If your bezel is in decent condition, we would probably pay around $10,000 for that watch, if it has boxing papers, which I'm assuming it does. So if the watch is in great condition, somebody's offering you $8,000 a year, they are lowballing it. But if the bezel is screwed and you got chips on the bezel, that unfortunately is the price of that watch. So two reasons. Number one, it got old, and there's a lot of brand new options out there for an AP. And number two, maintenance. Maintenance, this is the one watch that, unfortunately, much like carbon watches that I mentioned before with carbon bezels, you have to replace those parts and it becomes costly. I'd be curious to see what condition that bezel is in. In fact, submit a video to Ian. I've asked you guys to submit videos for the new series that we're trying to put together, What's on Your Wrist. Make a video, email it to Ian, and I will not only use that in one of the episodes, I'll also have a look at the condition of your bezel. Hope that helps. Mateo Topless says, Roman, incredible content as always. Thank you, Mateo. Multi-part question, can you explain the benefits of buying a watch overseas or getting expensive pieces tax-free? Also, do exchange rates matter? Oftentimes I hear people say it's cheaper to buy in blank because of the exchange rate, but I've also heard it's a common misconception. Thanks for the knowledge and much love from Miami. Great questions, Mateo. I don't think I've ever discussed the whole currency thing. There are benefits of buying watches overseas, especially when you go to countries that carry a VAT tax. A lot of the European countries, and it's anywhere from 19 to 22% or 17 to 22%. Don't know exactly the rates of all the countries, but I'm sure you can look it up online, or Ian can put them up there for you. One of the things you have to understand is when you go to a particular country, the retail price often includes that VAT price. But the retail price is not exactly that of, let's say, the US retail price or the Asian retail price and so on and so forth. Depending on the country, some retail prices do vary, and you can sometimes catch a break where you get the VAT back as you leave the particular country. Now, all of a sudden, your watch is cheaper, and a lot of people do that. But what a lot of people don't do is when they go outside of the country and they buy that particular watch and they come back to the United States, you're supposed to pay duties on that within the United States, which will eventually even out that price. Of course, a lot of people just put it on their wrist, walk right through customs, nobody really says anything, and they get away with it. You get caught, you're gonna have to pay the taxes and you're gonna have to pay a fee. So that's not something I suggest you do. So really there is no win with VATs, maybe a tiny little bit. Where you can win is when you go overseas and you buy a hot model that's here, but it may not be as hot there. Let's say you buy the latest Royal Oak there, get your VATs back, pay the duties coming into the United States, which are not as much, less than $1,000. So you still do win. When it comes to exchange rates, it depends on the times. When times are turbulent, I remember the times where the euro was jumping all over the place. We as a business benefited from that greatly. One week we'd be buying from Europe, another week we'd be selling to Europe. In fact, I preferred when the euro was at $1.60. I sold so much to Europe that majority of my wholesale business was going to Europe. Well, now that it's down to 112, I'm able to buy from Europe and everything is evened out. When it was at 130, it was sort of neither here or there. And what the manufacturers did is they adjusted retail price. People from the European market wouldn't go to the US market because now all of a sudden stuff is cheaper, right? So the retail prices would be higher here. When the euro dipped back down, vice versa. But there's only so many times that a manufacturer can change their retail prices all over the place. So there were times in between, sometimes lasted for months, where the retail prices would differ in various places because of where the currencies were. At the end of the day, most of these guys are based on the Swiss franc, right? If you look at the CHF prices of any watch brand, you compare it to other regions, for the most part, you're going to be within 1 or 2, 3%. But sometimes those 1, 2, 3% make a difference, especially on a very expensive watch, right? Or a very popular model. But for the most part, there are times where you can look at currencies, you can play with currencies, and you can find yourself a comfortable spot where you're making money based on currency exchanges, as well as some of the tax implications that are carried in different countries. With taxes, it's a dangerous game that I don't suggest anybody play, because at the end of the day, there could be legal complications. Yes, you're not going to go to jail for 10 years by smuggling in a watch, but if you get caught, you don't really need that. The biggest reason you don't need that is because the next time you're going to go in and out of an airport and go traveling, you're going to be flagged, they're going to stop you every time and do an anal cavity search, and that's really why you shouldn't do that. But with exchange rates or currencies, yes, there are times where you can win. But if you're someone that's considering monitoring the currency markets and sort of win in between by purchasing something that can be done with anything, with watches, with clothes, with cars, it can be done with anything, right? But then ask yourself a question, why are you doing this when it comes to watches? If you're someone that's knowledgeable enough to be able to play the currencies market, then just do that, play the currency market, buy one currency and sell it later and make the money in between. And then whatever profits you make from that, you can spend it on the watch anywhere. It's really going to be irrelevant. So I hope you see where I'm coming from with this. Yes, it's not a myth. We have done this before. But at the end of the day, when you're playing with currencies, that's all you're doing is you're playing with currencies. Back in the day when the euro was fluctuating up and down, I used to lock in contracts. I would lock in €1 million at a specific rate, 30 days out, anticipating the euro going up or down. But really for my own peace of mind, knowing that I've already fixed the cost of the watches that are going to be incoming over the next 30 days if they're coming in from Europe or elsewhere. And that's really it. You're just playing with currencies. Next question comes from BJ Yamal. Hey Roman, thanks for answering my questions. You're welcome. By the way, I see that you travel a lot and to buy and sell watches. I live in Singapore, and I do feel that we have plenty of robust used market and relatively cheaper prices compared to, say, Japan or Hong Kong, or maybe I just don't know the right people. Where are the overseas spots that you can recommend to get the best deal outside of USA? Let's just limit it to used Rolex and AP. Cheers, Dr. VJ from Singapore. Used Rolex and AP is the hottest commodities out in the market today, alongside with Richard Milles and a few specific models from various other brands. So to answer your question, there's really nowhere you're going to go today to buy used Rolex or AP at a better price versus any other region, because it's the hottest commodities on the market right now. So used Rolex, the difference in price may be $50 to $100 if you're talking about certain steel models and so on and so forth. Maybe upwards of $500. But in reality, you're not going to see too huge of a difference. Why? Because every single dealer out there wants to get out there and buy used Rolexes, because that's the easiest thing to buy. That's the easiest thing to sell, and it's the safest thing to sell, and it's the fastest thing to sell. We don't do a lot of used Rolex business, and the reason we don't do that is because there's no money in it, for the very reason I just told you. I know guys that sell Rolexes, they make $50 to $100 a Rolex, and they have to flip over 50 of them a week to make any decent money. But these are usually guys that don't have a whole lot of overhead, they don't run websites, they don't have big companies, they're just usually a solo man operation, and it works for them. My whole take on that is risk. I always assess risk when I invest money into anything. When I get out there and I buy a Sky Moon Tourbillon for over $1 million, I assess the risk behind it. What if the market drops 10 to 20%? How long am I going to hold that watch until I sell it? So what kind of a margin should I make? With Rolexes, in order to do any kind of real business, and I'm not trying to sound snooty, but let's say I want to make $10,000 on Rolexes, and if I'm doing it wholesale, the average market is going to be $100 to $150. Let's just call it $100 for ease of math. So in order to make $10,000, I have to sell 100 Rolexes. If I'm buying 100 stainless steel used Rolexes, let's say an average price is $5,000. That's $500,000 that I'm now investing in order to make what? To make 10 grand. Well, the margin sucks, but okay, fine. On Rolex, that's supposed to be. You're not supposed to make more than 3, 4, 5%, right? I'm okay with that. But what about the risk aspect of things? If I go out and invest $500,000 in order to make 10 grand, and tomorrow the market dips just a little bit, by 10%, think of the possible loss that I may take, or the amount of time I'll have to now sit on that inventory in order to actually retail all those pieces and be able to at least get my money out of it. And that's why I shy away from the bulk used Rolex business, just because too much risk and not enough return on your investment. Don't get me wrong, I have 30, 40 Rolexes in stock downstairs, some vintage pieces, some regular pieces, just stuff that I take in trade, but I don't proactively go out there and try to hold a 500 watch or a 300 watch used Rolex inventory. When it comes to AP, it's a different ball game. It's something that we specialize in. These watches carry better margins when you sell them, or even at a smaller margin because of the higher retail, you tend to make more money, and they still move, and they still move well. But there's no such thing as best deals on used Rolex and AP unless Rolex dies out and becomes less popular, and so does AP. You're really not going to get out there and find a better deal on one region versus another. It all comes down to who you know. I still have clients in my cell phone that have been buying from me since I was a basement operation. And when these guys call me 15 years later, 17 years later, and they want a deal, guess what? They get a deal just because of the relationship that we have. And usually the way they get that deal is I take my time to ensure I find the best possible price. And oftentimes when they ask me for the hottest and the latest and the greatest, like Rolex or some of these hot APs, rather than marking it up and making a margin, oftentimes I make close to no margins, or sometimes even no margin. I've also sold watches at a loss to my good clients without them even knowing about it, just so they get that smoking deal, because these guys have spent $1 million with me over the last 10 years on various watches. So that doesn't mean I have to make money on every single watch. I just have to ensure that my client gets a quality product, because everybody wants to get a great deal. You know, everybody wants to feel like they got the best deal. So at the end of the day, for you to find best deals outside of the USA, it's really about who you know, who you have a relationship with. Oftentimes I have clients that tend to jump around. We call them whores, right? These are guys that will call me, they'll call 50 other dealers for the same exact watch until they get the very best possible price, and there's no loyalty, right? Story time. This was back when limited edition APs were hot. Guy calls me up, goes, Roman, I want a Polaris. I know, do you have a Polaris AP? At the time, Polarises were trading at about $24,000. How much can you do for me? This guy's bought for me before. I knew he was one of those guys that would jump around and ask everybody and their mother about this. You have it listed for $24,000. How much can you sell it to me for? I said, I can sell it to you for $23,000 would be your cost. Okay, I'll let you know. Hangs up the phone, starts calling everybody else. Literally 20 minutes later, I get a phone call from another dealer. He goes, hey Roman, do you have a Polaris? So I'm like, is the customer such and such? No, I don't think so. I don't think it's, I'm like, I think it's the same client because I just got a phone call on it. No, it's not the same client. It's somebody else. It's my own client. I got a feeling the guy was lying. Okay, what's gonna be my cost in it? You know what? I think we have the same client. I quoted the customer $23,000. Your cost is going to be $22,000. Go ahead and quote the guy $23,000. You can make your $1,000. I'll make my $1,000. Everybody's going to be happy, right? Again, I work with my competition instead of against it. Lo and behold, calls me 15 minutes later, hey Roman, what's the number of the limited edition of the watch? And this is where he actually made a mistake by asking me that. Tell him number whatever out of 1,000. 45 minutes later, I get a phone call from the same client. He's like, listen, I got a price of $22,500 from another dealer. Can you match the price? Can I ask you a question? The watch you're being offered, is it number such and such out of 1,000? Yeah, how did you know? No reason, just curious. I said, I'm sorry, my best price is going to be $23,000. Dude, but I bought from you before and I got this watch and this guy's quoting me $22,500. Listen, I'm happy when my clients get great deals elsewhere. Sometimes I can be better on price, sometimes I can be worse on price, right? Well, I guess I have to go buy from him. Listen, I apologize, it is what it is, but I can only do that much. Hangs up. 5 minutes later, I get a phone call from this dealer. He goes, I'll take the watch. I'm sorry, lo and behold, the watch is no longer available, so I'm sorry, I can't sell it to you. What do you mean? I sold it to this guy. Listen, the right thing for you to do was to say, yes, it is the same client. To make the same amount of money as I would have made, or allow me to make the sale to my client. Instead, you lied to me. You said that this is not a client I know. This is your own personal client, even though I know it's this guy that called you because he asked you for the number of the watch, and that's where you went wrong because I figured out right 100% that it's the same exact client. Taught the dealer a lesson. He was a relatively new dealer, and he was a guy that was driven by money versus relationship. I'm all about relationships, you know what I mean? Had he done right by me, he would have made that same amount of money. I would have sold him watch. He would have sold it to the same client, even though I could have made all the profit in the world. 30 minutes later, the client calls me. He goes, hey, the guy no longer has the watch. I know he doesn't have the watch. What do you mean? I explained to him the entire story, how I taught the dealer a lesson, and at the same time sort of taught him a lesson. I ended up selling him the watch for $22,000, which is the same price I was going to sell it to a dealer, showing him the benefits of doing business with a single dealer over the years. This guy's been a client of mine for 15 years now. Does he still shop around and snoop around and look at pricing to get an idea and so on and so forth? Absolutely, but in the very least, he instills enough trust in me to say that I'm going to always give him a fair deal. And he also has the understanding that sometimes you pay a little more, sometimes you pay a little less, but in the long term, the relationships do matter more than an additional $500 or $600 that you may or may not save on a particular purchase. And to go back to your questions, at the end of the day, it's not about the region. It's not about where you are, Hong Kong, Japan, or Singapore. It's about who you buy from. And again, in the long run, it will pay out. Hope that helps. I didn't mean for the last question to turn into a story, but I'm going to take one more and get out of here. This one is from Fat Amy. What do you think about the Rolex Daytona yellow-green dial prices? Well, obviously, you're asking about the fact that these things are trading at over list. I think they're wholesale on them at like around $42,000 at this point. It's funny with that watch. It came out of the gate. When it first came out, it was trading high, like almost at retail, maybe a little bit over retail. Then it came back down. You could pick them up in the low 20s, mid 20s to high 20s, and now it's up to $42,000. And the answer to your question is very, very simple. It's the same thing that's happening with all the other Rolex models, the stainless steel skydwellers, the GMTs. I've told you guys before, when you have a brand and you have a particular set of winners within that brand, whether it's one watch or 5 different watches, in case of Rolex, you have your steel Daytonas, you have your steel Skydwellers, you have your Batman GMTs, you have your Pepsi GMTs, et cetera, right? So it's more of a team of winners. So I think all the other things tend to go up in value alongside with them because the hype is real, as they say, right? I'm sure Ian is going to pop in something funny about that. And what's happening is that both on the dealer end like us and on the customer end, everybody wants to start buying up these Rolex because they see them going up price astronomically on a daily, sometimes hourly basis. And the same thing happened with the green Daytona. In regards to the watch, I think it's one of the best looking Daytonas out there. I've always liked the plain yellow gold Daytona white dial, but the green dial adds so much to the look of that watch. It's a beautiful dial. What's happening now is people taking regular yellow gold Daytonas and popping in green dials into them that are aftermarket dials so that you can pick up for high 20s. You can't tell the difference aftermarket versus not aftermarket dial because unless you take it out, just because the prices have become so prohibitive. So a lot of guys out there that want a green-faced yellow gold Daytona, they'll buy a regular yellow gold Daytona, put an aftermarket green dial into it, and save themselves $10,000 to $12,000. But I think the prices are nuts. I don't see the Rolex hype coming down anytime soon. It's going to correct itself. It's not going to flop, but it is going to correct itself, or at least it'll stable out somewhere. Do I see that Daytona going further than $40,000 to $50,000? I don't know. I don't have a glass ball. I've told you guys before. But to simply answer your question, what I think about the Rolex Daytona yellow, gold, green dial prices, I think they're pretty nuts. But I love the watch at the same time. Hope that helps. Well, guys, that's it for me for today. Last but not least, I tend to forget to do this on Q&A Tuesday. But let me show you what's on my wrist, and you'd be shocked. And some of you may be surprised, but I'm wearing a Seiko. That's right, I'm wearing a Seiko Astron GPS watch, one that adjusts the time from a satellite and is solar powered. I've told you guys before, it doesn't matter the brand, it doesn't matter the price, it doesn't matter what it is. This watch retails, I think, for $2,600 or something like that, right? I buy what I like, I wear what I like, and you should do the same. You would think from a guy that wears APs or sometimes $500,000 tourbillons or crazy vintage watches, why would I put on the Seiko? The answer is simple. I like the way the watch looks, and that's just the end of it. Guys, thanks for all your questions as usual. Comment your new questions below. This is what makes these episodes possible, and I'll see you guys next Tuesday.